11:30 p.m. The industrial district's narrow alleyways trapped the darkness between towering warehouses. Broken streetlights flickered like dying candles, casting twisted shadows across oil-stained concrete. The screams cut through the silence like a blade. A black van. Red light. Two masked figures dragging a woman in a torn business suit into the darkness. Most people would run, call for help, pray someone else would act. But Marcus Thompson wasn't most people. The 43-year-old night security guard moved like a ghost through the shadows, his weathered work boots silent on the pavement. In one fluid motion, he struck the first kidnapper's pressure point. The man crumpled. The second attacker spun around, only to meet Marcus's elbow to his temple. 30 seconds. Two unconscious bodies. One stunned woman staring at her unlikely savior. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked. But the way he checked her pulse and scanned the shadows told her everything she needed to know about who he really was. The woman's hands trembled as she smoothed down her torn blazer, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. Elena Rodriguez had dealt with hostile boardrooms and cutthroat negotiations, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The man standing before her looked like any other blue-collar worker heading home from a late shift, yet he'd just dismantled two armed kidnappers with surgical precision. His weathered face remained calm, almost bored, as if violence was just another Tuesday night inconvenience. She noticed the way his eyes continuously swept their surroundings, cataloging every shadow and potential threat. This wasn't luck or adrenaline, this was training. "I'm fine," Elena managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus nodded once and pulled out an old flip phone, dialing what she assumed was 911. Instead, he spoke in clipped professional tones about cleanup and extraction protocols. Elena's blood ran cold. Who exactly had saved her, and why did he sound like he was reporting to a handler? When Marcus ended the call, he turned back to her with the same measured calm. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I work night security at the Morrison Industrial Complex." He gestured to the unconscious men. "This wasn't random. Someone wanted you specifically." Elena's mind raced as Marcus helped her to his battered pickup truck parked in the shadows. She was the CEO of MindTech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing tech companies on the West Coast. Her enemies were corporate rivals, not violent criminals who hired professional kidnappers. Yet here she was, saved by a security guard who moved like a special forces operator. As they drove through empty streets, Elena studied Marcus's profile in the dashboard light. The strong jaw, the alert eyes that missed nothing, the way his hands remained steady on the wheel despite what had just happened. She'd built her career on reading people, and everything about Marcus Thompson screamed classified background. The question was why a man with his obvious skills was working as a night watchman. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Marcus glanced at her through the rearview mirror, and she caught something unexpected in his expression. Worry, not for himself, but for someone else. "My daughter," he said simply. "Emma's with my neighbor, but after tonight, nowhere safe until we figure out who's behind this." Elena felt a strange tightness in her chest. This man had risked his life for a stranger, and now he was bringing his child into potential danger because of her. She'd always prided herself on being independent, never needing rescue or protection. Tonight had shattered that illusion completely. As they pulled into a modest neighborhood lined with small houses and chain-link fences, Elena realized she was about to enter a world as foreign to her as her corporate empire was to Marcus. The house was small but meticulously maintained, with a tiny garden and wind chimes that tinkled softly in the night breeze. Marcus moved with the same cautious precision, checking windows and scanning the street before letting Elena follow him to the front door. Mrs. Chen, an elderly Asian woman in a floral robe, opened the door before Marcus could knock. Her eyes immediately went to Elena's torn clothing and Marcus's tense posture. "Everything okay?" she asked in accented English, her motherly concern evident. Marcus nodded but didn't elaborate. "Emma's asleep in the back room. Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Chen." The old woman studied Elena with shrewd eyes before disappearing to fetch the child. Elena found herself holding her breath, waiting to meet the most important person in Marcus's world. Emma Thompson emerged, rubbing sleepy eyes, a 9-year-old girl with her father's dark hair and alert gaze. She wore dinosaur pajamas and clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. When she saw Elena, her expression shifted from confusion to open curiosity. "Who's the pretty lady, Dad?" Emma asked, and Elena felt her heart do something unexpected. No one had called her pretty in years. Her boardroom colleagues used words like intimidating, brilliant, or ruthless. Pretty wasn't part of her professional vocabulary. Marcus knelt to Emma's level, his entire demeanor softening in a way that made Elena's chest tighten. "This is Miss Rodriguez, sweetheart. She's going to stay with us for a few days." Emma nodded solemnly, then looked directly at Elena. "Are you in trouble? Dad only brings people home when they need help." Out of the mouths of babes. The interior of Marcus's house told a story Elena hadn't expected. The furniture was modest but comfortable, with family photos covering every available surface. Most featured a beautiful woman with Marcus and a younger Emma, all three laughing at some shared joke. Elena's eyes lingered on one particular photo where the woman was clearly pregnant, Marcus's hand protectively covering her belly. This was Sarah, Emma's mother, Marcus's wife. The woman was nowhere to be seen in recent photos, and Elena noticed the subtle shift in Marcus's expression when he caught her looking. Death, not divorce. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This man had lost everything once before, and now he was risking what little he had left to protect her. The weight of that responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a lead blanket. Emma had no such reservations about their unusual house guest. While Marcus checked the locks and closed all the blinds, Emma chattered away about school, her drawings, and her ambition to become either a veterinarian or a superhero when she grew up. "I could be both," she explained seriously to Elena. "Superheroes probably need to know how to take care of animals, too." Elena found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in months. When was the last time someone had talked to her about anything other than quarterly reports and market projections? Emma's innocent questions about Elena's job led to simplified explanations about running a company, which somehow evolved into Emma drawing pictures of Elena's robot helpers on the back of old takeout menus. Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway, and Elena caught something vulnerable in his expression before he turned away. The sleeping arrangements were awkward but necessary. Marcus gave Elena his bedroom and took the couch, despite her protests. Emma insisted on showing Elena where everything was, from the bathroom to the kitchen to her own room, which was decorated with drawings of fantastical creatures and family portraits that didn't include her mother. "Mom's in heaven," Emma explained matter-of-factly when she noticed Elena looking, "but Dad says she watches over us, especially when we help other people." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. When had she become so isolated that a child's simple faith could move her to tears? That night, lying in Marcus's bed, surrounded by his scent and his memories, Elena stared at the ceiling and wondered how her carefully controlled life had spiraled into chaos in a single evening. Marcus was already awake when Elena emerged the next morning, having clearly not slept at all. He sat at the kitchen table with a laptop that looked far too sophisticated for a security guard's salary, fingers flying over keys with practiced efficiency. Emma was eating cereal and working on homework, occasionally glancing up to smile at Elena. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that Elena felt like an intruder in their peaceful world. "Coffee?" Marcus offered. And Elena noticed his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. She wanted to ask what he'd been researching, who he'd been contacting, but Emma's presence made serious conversation impossible. Instead, they moved around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease, Elena helping Emma with math homework while Marcus made breakfast. For a moment, Elena allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to belong somewhere like this. The illusion shattered when Marcus's phone rang. His expression went cold as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Vincent Morrison," he said after hanging up, and Elena's blood turned to ice. Morrison was her biggest competitor, a ruthless businessman who'd been trying to acquire MindTech for over a year. His offers had grown increasingly aggressive as Elena continued to refuse them. "He wants to meet with you, today. Says if you don't show up, Last night was just the beginning. Elena's hands began to shake. Morrison had orchestrated her kidnapping, which meant he knew exactly how isolated and vulnerable she was. Marcus studied her reaction with those sharp eyes. There's something you're not telling me about why Morrison wants your company so badly. Elena looked at Emma, innocently eating her cereal, and realized she was about to drag this family deeper into danger. The truth came out in fragments, Elena's carefully maintained composure cracking under Marcus's steady gaze. MindTech wasn't just another tech company. They'd developed revolutionary security software that could detect and prevent cyber attacks before they happened. Elena's father had started the company with that vision, but he'd died before seeing it fully realized. Morrison's company, TechVault, specialized in the exact opposite technology that MindTech was designed to stop. If Morrison acquired her company, he could manipulate both sides of the cybersecurity market. Elena had evidence of Morrison's illegal activities, hidden in encrypted files that only she could access. She'd been preparing to go to the FBI when Morrison decided to take a more direct approach. Marcus listened without judgment, but Elena could see the calculations running behind his eyes. This wasn't just about protecting her anymore. This was about preventing a dangerous man from gaining control of technology that could affect national security. Emma had finished breakfast and was getting ready for school when Marcus made a decision that surprised Elena. "You're not going today, sweetheart," he told his daughter gently. Emma's face fell, but she didn't argue. She was clearly accustomed to sudden changes in routine. "Are we going on an adventure?" she asked hopefully. Marcus smiled, but Elena could see the strain behind it. "Something like that. Pack your backpack with clothes and your favorite books." As Emma scampered off to her room, Marcus turned to Elena with grim determination. "Morrison made this personal when he brought my daughter into it. But if we're going to stop him, I need to know everything. And I mean everything." Elena nodded, understanding that her life of careful secrets was about to become an open book. The question was whether Marcus would still want to help her once he knew the whole truth. The revelation about Elena's identity hit Marcus like a physical blow. She wasn't just some random CEO who'd gotten in over her head. She was the daughter of the man who'd revolutionized cybersecurity, and more importantly, she was the employer of his late wife Sarah. 5 years ago, Sarah had been working as a legal consultant for MindTech when she died in what police called a tragic accident. Marcus had never questioned the circumstances, too lost in grief to investigate further. But now, looking at Elena's guilt-stricken face, he began to piece together a different story. "Sarah discovered something about Morrison, didn't she?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. She found evidence that he was selling vulnerabilities to foreign governments. She was going to testify against him. Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. And then she died. The weight of Sarah's death had shaped Marcus's entire life for 5 years. He'd left his government position, unable to focus on protecting others when he'd failed to protect his own wife. He'd taken the security job to be close to Emma, to create a simple life where nothing could touch them. But Sarah's ghost had been reaching out from the grave, drawing him into exactly the kind of situation he'd tried to escape. Elena's voice was barely a whisper as she continued. "Morrison made it look like an accident, but I knew. I've been building a case against him ever since, collecting evidence, preparing for the day I could make him pay for what he did to Sarah." Marcus stared at her, seeing not the polished CEO, but a woman who'd spent 5 years carrying the weight of his wife's death. The anger he expected to feel didn't come. Instead, there was something else, something more dangerous. Understanding. Emma's voice, calling from her bedroom, broke the tension. Marcus and Elena moved apart, both struggling to process what had just been revealed. When Emma emerged with her stuffed backpack, she looked between the two adults with the perceptive gaze that children sometimes possess. "You're both sad," she observed. "Is it because of my mom?" Marcus knelt down to his daughter's level, his heart breaking at her innocence. "Yes, sweetheart. But we're going to make sure that no one else gets hurt the way Mommy did." Emma nodded solemnly, then did something that surprised everyone. She walked over to Elena and took her hand. "It's okay," she said simply. Dad says Mom would want us to help people who are scared. Elena's composure finally shattered completely, and she knelt down to Emma's level, pulling the child into a fierce hug. The safe house Marcus chose was an abandoned warehouse in the same industrial district where he'd rescued Elena. It seemed counterintuitive to return to the scene of the crime, but Marcus's tactical mind understood that Morrison would expect them to run far and fast. Sometimes the best hiding place was right under your enemy's nose. The warehouse had been converted years ago into artist studios, but the economic downturn had left most spaces empty. Marcus had discovered it during his security rounds and knew all the entrances, exits, and sightlines. More importantly, the building had independent power and internet, courtesy of the few remaining tenants. Elena was impressed despite herself. For a man who claimed to be just a security guard, Marcus certainly knew how to disappear. Setting up their temporary command center, Elena watched Marcus transform before her eyes. Gone was the gentle father and protective rescuer. In his place stood someone Elena recognized from news reports and military documentaries. This was Commander Marcus Thompson, the man who'd led classified operations in places that didn't officially exist. His movements were economical and precise as he established security protocols and communication networks. Emma seemed unfazed by her father's transformation, settling into a corner with her books and drawings as if camping in abandoned warehouses was perfectly normal. "Is this what you used to do before I was born?" she asked casually. Marcus paused in his equipment setup. "Something like that, sweetheart. But that was a long time ago." Elena realized she was seeing the real Marcus Thompson for the first time. The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of running from Morrison, they would draw him out into the open. Elena would agree to the meeting Morrison had demanded, but on their terms and with their preparations. Marcus would use his old contacts to ensure the meeting was monitored and recorded by federal authorities. Elena's evidence, combined with Morrison's inevitable attempts to silence her permanently, would provide everything the FBI needed to put him away forever. It was dangerous, potentially suicidal, but it was also their only chance to end Morrison's threat permanently. As they refined the details, Elena found herself watching Marcus work with growing admiration. This wasn't just about protecting her anymore. This was about justice for Sarah, safety for Emma, and closure for them all. Emma had been unusually quiet during their planning session, working on what appeared to be another one of her elaborate drawings. When she finally held it up, both adults stopped talking. The picture showed a family of 3 stick figures, 2 adults and 1 child, standing in front of a house with a rainbow overhead. But what caught Elena's attention was the way Emma had drawn the woman. She looked remarkably like Elena, down to the business suit and long dark hair. "This is our new family," Emma announced proudly. "Dad and Elena and me." Marcus's face went through several emotions before settling on something Elena couldn't quite read. "Emma, sweetheart," he began carefully, but the little girl was already moving on to her next artistic project. Elena stared at the drawing, feeling something shift inside her chest. When had she started thinking of herself as part of this family? And more importantly, when had that started feeling like something she desperately wanted? The meeting with Morrison was set for the next evening at the abandoned pier where Sarah had died 5 years ago. Morrison's choice of location was clearly intended to rattle Elena, a reminder of what happened to people who crossed him. But Marcus saw it differently. The pier was isolated, with limited escape routes and clear sight lines. If Morrison was planning something violent, he'd chosen the perfect place to be caught in the act. Elena spent the day preparing for what might be her final performance, practicing the mixture of fear and defiance that Morrison would expect to see. She'd built her career on reading people and manipulating situations to her advantage. Tomorrow night, those skills would either save her life or get her killed. The stakes had never been higher, and she'd never felt more ready for the fight. As sunset approached, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in Sarah's old files, which Marcus had finally allowed her to examine, was a video message intended for Elena specifically. Sarah had recorded it just days before her death, her face grim with determination and fear. "Elena, if you're watching this, then something has happened to me and Morrison is making his move. But I need you to know something that changes everything." Marcus doesn't know this, but I wasn't just your legal consultant. I was working undercover for the FBI. My real name was Agent Sarah Chen, and I was assigned to protect you because your father contacted us before he died. He knew Morrison would come for you eventually. Elena's hands shook as the implications sank in. Marcus's wife had been a federal agent, and her death had been not just murder, but the killing of a law enforcement officer. Morrison hadn't just destroyed Marcus's family. He'd committed a federal crime that carried the death penalty. The revelation about Sarah's true identity sent Marcus into a rage unlike anything Elena had ever witnessed. The careful control he'd maintained for days cracked completely, and she saw the dangerous man Morrison had inadvertently awakened. Sarah hadn't just been his wife and Emma's mother. She'd been a fellow warrior, someone who'd understood the cost of protecting others. Marcus had mourned her as a civilian casualty of his world, but knowing she'd been a federal agent changed the nature of his grief entirely. She'd died doing the job they'd both sworn to do, and Morrison had literally gotten away with murder. Emma, sensing her father's emotional storm, climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered. "Mommy's still watching over us. And now Elena is here to help too." The child's faith broke through Marcus's rage, reminding him what he was really fighting for. The final confrontation began exactly as they'd planned. Elena arrived at the pier alone, wearing a wire that would broadcast everything to the FBI team positioned in surveillance vans around the perimeter. Morrison was waiting with 2 bodyguards, his confidence evident in every gesture. He was a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and cold eyes that reminded Elena of a shark. "You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Miss Rodriguez," he said without preamble. "But that ends tonight." Elena forced herself to remain calm, remembering Marcus's coaching about staying in character. "You killed Sarah Chen," she said, loud enough for the wire to pick up clearly. Morrison's smile was genuinely chilling. "Agent Chen was an unfortunate necessity, just like you're about to be." The admission was clear and recorded, but Elena knew Morrison had no intention of letting her live to testify. This was about to become a fight for survival. What Morrison hadn't counted on was Marcus Thompson's ability to disappear and reappear like a ghost. The pier might have been isolated, but it was also surrounded by water and shadows that provided perfect concealment for someone with Marcus's training. Elena saw him first, a shadow moving along the pier's support beams beneath Morrison's feet. The bodyguards were professionals, but they were looking for threats at ground level, not from below. Marcus struck with surgical precision, neutralizing both guards before Morrison even realized they were under attack. But Morrison was more dangerous than his hired help. He pulled a gun on Elena, using her as a human shield while FBI agents closed in from all directions. "Agent Chen died for nothing," Morrison snarled. "Just like her husband is about to watch his new girlfriend die." The shot came from an impossible angle, threading between Elena and Morrison with mathematical precision. Morrison's gun went flying, his shoulder blossoming red as he spun and collapsed. Marcus materialized from the shadows like an avenging spirit, his own weapon trained on Morrison's head. "That was for Sarah," he said quietly. Around them, FBI agents swarmed the pier, taking Morrison into custody, while EMTs attended to his shoulder wound. Elena stood frozen in the center of it all, hardly believing it was over. Morrison was screaming about lawyers and immunity deals, but the recording of his confession would ensure he never saw freedom again. As the chaos settled around them, Marcus holstered his weapon and pulled Elena into his arms. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah's killer would face justice. For the first time in Elena's adult life, she felt truly safe. 3 months later, Elena Rodriguez was no longer CEO of MindTech Solutions. She'd sold the company to a consortium of ethical tech firms, ensuring Morrison would never get his hands on her father's innovations. The FBI had recommended a new identity and relocation, but Elena had declined. She had something more important than safety now. She had a family. The modest house in Marcus's neighborhood had been transformed into something that belonged to all 3 of them. Elena's piano occupied the corner of the living room, where she gave Emma lessons every evening after dinner. Marcus had started his own security consulting firm, using his skills to protect people who needed help but couldn't afford traditional bodyguards. The work gave him purpose without requiring him to leave his family for extended periods. Emma had adapted to their new normal with the resilience that children possess in abundance. She still missed her mother, but she'd also embraced Elena with the wholehearted acceptance that adults often envied. Their evening routine included homework, piano practice, and story time, with Elena and Marcus alternating who read the bedtime stories. Tonight was Elena's turn, and she'd chosen a book about brave princesses who saved themselves. As Emma drifted off to sleep, Elena reflected on how much her definition of success had changed. Quarterly reports and board meetings seemed like relics from another lifetime. The work that mattered now was measured in Emma's laughter, Marcus's peaceful sleep, and the photos accumulating on their refrigerator door. The wedding had been small, held in the backyard with Mrs. Chen officiating and Emma serving as both flower girl and ring bearer. Sarah's photo held a place of honor on the gift table, not as a ghost to be replaced, but as the woman whose love had created the foundation for this new beginning. Marcus still wore his original wedding ring on a chain around his neck, while Elena's engagement ring was a simple band that matched the one Marcus had given Sarah years before. They weren't trying to recreate the past or pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, they were building something new from the ashes of their separate losses. Emma had insisted on releasing balloons after the ceremony, one for each member of their extended family, including Sarah, Elena's parents, and even Mrs. Chen's late husband. "So they know we're all together now," she'd explained seriously. The final evening of their story found them exactly where they belonged. Marcus was grilling burgers in the backyard while Elena and Emma worked in their small garden, planting tomatoes and sunflowers for the summer ahead. The neighborhood around them hummed with the ordinary magic of families living their lives. Children playing in yards, and the sound of dinner conversations drifting through open windows. Elena had learned to treasure these moments of peaceful normalcy, understanding now that they were the real victory. Morrison was serving life in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. Sarah's killer had been brought to justice, and her daughter was growing up surrounded by love and security. As the sun set behind their modest house, Elena realized she'd found something more valuable than any corporate empire. She'd found home. That night, as they tucked Emma into bed, the little girl made an announcement that surprised no one. "I think Mom would like our family," she said sleepily, "and I think she's happy that Elena makes you smile again, Dad." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances over Emma's head, both understanding that wisdom sometimes came from the smallest voices. Later, as they sat on their front porch watching the stars appear in the clear sky, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them together. It had started with violence and fear, but it had led to something neither of them had dared to hope for. Second chances didn't come often, but when they did, the smart thing was to hold on tight and never let go. Marcus took her hand in his, their wedding rings catching the porch light, and Elena knew that some stories really did have happy endings. They just took longer to write than anyone expected.